Hi, hello, hey everybody. I have absolutely no plan for this Kirblog whatsoever, but this is a really cool topic, and I apologize ahead of time if I'm very all over the place with this one. Forgive me. But this is a question that comes from maishulkitty, asking, "Hey there, Chris, love your work. Can you give any tips to someone who is looking to redesign old characters for a new project?" I absolutely love doing this. I have, in particular, grown to love this over the last decade or so, kind of around the time that I started going to college. When do we start off with this? I'll start with I think that there's something, this is going to sound like a silly word, but genuinely magical about when you're a kid and you're, beginning to get creative and come up with stuff. I mean, when I was a kid, I came up with so many stupid ideas for toys, board games, and TV shows, and movies, and books, and comics, and games, and anything and everything ever. And characters were always at the forefront. In my experience, and this is not just in my own, but I think from the secondhand of watching other people I grew up with, and and even now, younger kids and relatives and things like that when they're in their sort of creative stage. I think that there's something, again, genuinely magical about when you're not being held back by any sort of limitation. When you get older, and especially if you're an artist or a writer or whatever, like any sort of creative person, in that sort of position, you learn more and you have more experiences, and there are rules that you kind of are unconsciously following, which is good in the sense of like, you're learning and you're getting better at what it is that you do. But as compared to, when you're a kid and you don't have any perception or idea whatsoever of what the rules are, or, what's good and what's bad, you're just completely free form. Your mind is completely like a blank slate of just coming up with anything, even if it's not necessarily like the most inventive or the most original thing or whatever. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes there's just something about that, like that childish sort of like, I could do anything. It could be this or that or whatever. For me, I based a lot of my characters off of people that I knew in real life. I've talked a lot about that. I had a whole Kirblog about specifically characters based on friends. But and of course I had my fair share of like, fan characters, and I had, a lot of original cartoon characters and things like that for a lot of different purposes and et cetera, for all these different mediums I wanted to try out and all these different things that I wanted to do, and a lot of things that I aim still to do at some point. I still hold on to that. But, it's funny because I feel like kind of the spirit of this topic is also like when I see these memes of people go back and they take, work from like a decade ago or however, like sometime when they were a kid, and then like redrawing it with their current skill set, which I also think is fun. I mean, TOME more or less is that, and I'm going to kind of get into the meat of that soon. As far as addressing the question, to start with that, I think it first of all depends on exactly why it is that you are redesigning those characters, because I think that you need to understand exactly, this is the benefit to when you're older and you have a wider sort of understanding of what it is that you're doing. I think that you have to have a goal in mind. You have to have some sort of like purpose of like, okay, why am I doing this? Even if the purpose is just like, oh, I feel like going back and redesigning these characters, even if it's just like an exercise in refining something from years ago. But there's many ways to do that. For me, I was starting to, and now I'm going to get into this here. I was starting to think about the idea of wanting to do a TOME game. This was before the show was made, because originally I wanted to try doing it as a game, and then there's a whole story behind that. I did it on one of the commentary episodes. But I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to do this. So I just kind of went back to that childish place of like, okay, freeform. The TOME characters were all not only based on the people that I knew from the TV TOME forums, but they were also like visually, they were just, what would this screen name look like if it were made into a character? What would Game Crazed or Nylok or whatever look like as a character? In some cases, it was based purely off of the name and like the personality of the person that it was associated with, and that was it. Nothing else I had to work with, And so what I did is first I was like, okay, well, let me go back to those designs and apply certain drawing techniques and design techniques that I've just learned over the years since then, and just kind of apply those into it to begin with.
That was the starting point. The next thing I had to consider that was very important, arguably even more important, was because, okay, the medium I'm going for is animation, and I'm going to be potentially doing I'm doing all the animation on my own. So I have to make these designs usable in a way that I can draw them a million times, because if I'm going to be animating them, I'm going to be having to draw them a million times. And in some ways, some of those designs might have even failed. I think that was also part of the reason why I changed Flame Girl's hair partway through. I think I said this on one of the commentaries as well. By the way, it's just a little side note. If you haven't checked out the Tome commentaries, here's a link to the playlist, because they're cool, and we talk about a lot of this stuff. Anyway, because like Flame Girl's hair was as much as I loved the design and visually it was cool, it was really, really difficult to animate because of the way that I had designed it, and I didn't think about applying it to animation as much as I could have, compared to some of the other ones that, like Kirb is super easy for me to draw, from whatever way I need to, for the most part. Sometimes his head shapes are a little strange. This is also the benefit of when you're older and you have the whole process of like doing a character design sheet, and you can draw them from any angle, so that way you'll know exactly what to do with them. But having the starting point of like, and this is also what helps too, is like when you're designing the character in general, I think that you do kind of have to tap into that sort of, childlike part of yourself, and just, kind of get to like, okay, what is it that works? What do I think is cool? What do I find to be appealing personally? If it's for a job or something, then that's a whole other story. But if you're just like, if you're redesigning your own characters, if you're designing your own characters, I would like to think that you're thinking of, what appeals to you first and foremost. I think that's kind of the heart of it all. And then for redesigning a character that you made, at some point, you want to go back and fiddle with it. I think it really comes down to like what it is that you've learned that you can apply to it. Another really good example, and anybody who's known me for a long extent of time probably knows this. I go back and I redesign the characters from, my biggest IP that I'm going to do down the line, which is Balancing Act. I've had those characters for well over half my lifetime. I want to say I first started creating them around when I was like 5 or something. And they've gone through so many different incarnations. Several of them have changed genders, in fact, over time, because I wanted to have a more rounded out cast in terms of, ratio of male to female characters. And those changes, that I make, every year or so, depending, sometimes like within the middle of a year, they can be anything from, say, I don't know, the outfit in like, oh, okay, this looks cooler, and also this is easier to draw, and, or this is more fitting for what their special power is and how it applies to, their special abilities and things, to something like, oh, should I give them a hat, or should I change their haircut to a shape that's a little bit, cooler looking or more unique or less like this other character or whatever, to even something as, minuscule as the way that I draw their facial features. That's a big thing in terms of like, I've changed the nose, eye, mouth, head shapes of like the main characters of Balancing Act so many times. But each one of those changes has been a refinement in making them stand out and be more unique. And in fact, I remember, here's a good example. So when I was a kid, I used to have this particular, it wasn't quite like a Hey Arnold style, but I had this like same kind of way of drawing everybody's, it was same face, anime fans will know that term. It was a lot of the same kind of, eyes and nose and mouth shapes that I'd have for every single character. And then as I got older, I started to differentiate them. But then one of the things that was staying the same for everybody was the eyes. The eyes always look the same. The noses and the mouths are starting to get differentiated, in addition to more of the further details. But the eyes were always the same. And then I remembered, like, wait, I used to draw some of my characters with these like little dot eyes, and then some characters with the bigger eyes. Like you think about like Eiichiro Oda, or like back in the day, like the girls would all have the same type of eyes, and then the guy characters would all have the little dot eyes. When Eiichiro Oda would draw them, and then over time he's gotten to differentiate them a lot more in terms of rounding out the range of how crazy his designs can be. And One Piece is Oda's a master of crazy, wacky, inventive character designs, and he's really conquered almost anything you can imagine when it comes to character designs. He's a god among us all. Watch One Piece. So I know I'm kind of answering this like through example, but I feel like that's kind of the best way to tackle this one is balancing act is the best case of this for me, in terms of like behind the scenes stuff of like I'm always applying what I've been learning. And then with Tome, I think it's the biggest example like in practice. And that's also part of why like I'll make slight changes to the design over the course of the show, between like some of the characters having design changes for one reason or another, like with Nilak's beard and Flamey's haircut and Alpha's outfit or whatever. And then to, the season 2 designs that everybody just loves to death. Yeah. So that's kind of the in practice one that I have most of all, because it's there for everybody to see. And with balancing act, I have the luxury of, I can wait until I'm ready to do it, before people can, have the final designs to be attached to and everything. But I can take everything I learn and put it into that. So then, the bottom line is definitely like there's a sense of you have to like tap back into that sort of, childlike sensibility of like, okay, let me start with just not obeying the rules and just being completely freeform, so that way I can just be unique with it and be ridiculous or whatever. And then you start to apply the more adult things that you've learned. It sounds weird. When I say adult things, I mean like in terms of the experiences that you've gained, and I would like to think, over the course of 2 decades, you learned a lot more, and I have learned a lot more, I think, about what makes for an interesting looking design, what makes for a colorful cast of characters, especially when you have like multiple designs that are all kind of like linked together, if they're a group of friends or whatever, for whatever the story is. Again, I think it comes down to what's the context, what's the purpose, for, why these characters are here. I think that applies no matter whether you're designing or redesigning old characters. I think that's what it comes down to, is you have to think of the purpose. That's the thing that has to guide you through all of it, at the end of the day. As far as like what the final product, the end product has to be, like that your purpose has to guide you through it. But again, even on like a smaller scale, if it's just like, you just feel like going back and redoing some of these designs. Oh, I remember this character. I remember like this Sonic character that I had, or this Mega Man OC or whatever. Like, oh, this Kirby fan character, whatever, anything like that. I think that you can always just have that as an exercise, and then sometimes you never know. You might end up like finding, oh, this is a cool character that I could use for something else. When put into a proper context. But even if it's just kind of a standalone thing. There's something kind of cool to gain out of it, and that's part of why I love doing it so much. Balancing act I think is the most consistent one that I go back to, but there's other ones that I've been trying to like make time for. The problem is there's so little time I have anymore for like doing a lot of this stuff because I'm just so busy working on Tome itself and trying to get episodes out. But it's definitely something that I love to do when I'm just like, because that's the thing is like with drawing, I always have to have some kind of purpose or whatever. So when I'm like, oh, I'm going to go back and like, mess around with this character design that I made when I was like 5 years old or whatever, like that's the closest thing that I have time for anymore in terms of like just being freeform and just drawing for fun because of just how much I'm consumed with work, you know what I mean? So I think it can also be kind of a nice sort of decompressant for if you've got something more consistent that you have to dedicate all your time to. But I think that something like this is very relaxing and it's fun and it's like, oh, look at it. It's a great way to see how much you've improved or not improved. But but seriously, I think that is it's a great measure of what your ability is at that place in time. I'm sure you could. Even more so than that meme of like, oh, new and old, this is what I drew when I was a kid, and this is what my skill level is now. I love even more than that when people have like, this is what my character looked like in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, et cetera, and kind of going through that just to see how far you've gotten with that, you know what I mean? And, I just hope in my case that what it is that I chose to do for Tome, has resonated with people, and the characters themselves are telling the story in an interesting way that is entertaining to people. But, and then there's always the next thing. And all of these things are projects and ideas that I had when I was a kid. Even the ideas just past the design, they're, the story ideas in addition, which that might be another Kirblog topic as well about stories specifically. They all come from that same, root of childlike wonder, I guess you could say. You know what? Also, I think the biggest example, and I'll even have it in here. Maybe I'll try to put the image in, or if not, then I'll just have a link to it in the description or something. Is the biggest example of what it is I'm talking about is I did this. I went back and I found all these old pictures of my self-insert character from Balancing Act, Frost, where I went back and found pictures that I did in like 2000, maybe earlier than that even, probably. And just seeing, I think it was like 10 different versions of them that have evolved over the years. And you can see just how far to come along and, what different things I had applied. You can see like the body shape, the eyes, the nose shape, me getting more comfortable with drawing my nose the way it normally looks, even, something like that, to, the outfit, everything. You can see, firsthand exactly how it is that it evolved and how it is that I applied things that I learned when I was older to something that I started when I was a kid, and how effective I think that can be for anybody really who is designing their own characters or redesigning old characters. This has been a very free-form one. I hope this wasn't too weird and all over the place. And Chris, what the hell are you talking about for the last 16 minutes or whatever? That's going to do it for me. In the comments below, please tell me, have you had any experiences like this? If you're an artist, or even if you're a writer, or just somebody who has made up your own characters, or built stuff, have you gone back and done something like this? Have you gone back and redesigned or revisited and wanted to revamp something that you had years ago when you were a kid? What was that experience like? Did you enjoy it? What kind of new stuff did you apply to what it is that you were revisiting and trying to relive, revamp, redesign, whatever? Tell me. I want to hear some stories about this from all y'all. And if you have ideas for future Kirblog topics that will hopefully be less disconjointed and weird as this one in terms of what my answer was, sorry for that. Leave a comment about that too, or hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, whatever you feel like. And hopefully you might inspire the next Kirblog topic maybe on Tuesday. I don't have a goddamn clue. We'll see. That'll do it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for bearing with me and being patient. And I will catch you all later. Bye-bye.